Okay, so in this video I've set up a guitar tone that doesn't have any EQ whatsoever on it. And this time I'm using some impulse responses from my impulse response pack that I have pre-EQ'd. And really they're just dependent on how you dial in the amp to get them to sit in the mix. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to do. So I'm going to show you how I've got these guitars to sound like they do. Before we get into it though, I just want to say a huge shout out to everyone on my Patreon. If you sign up to that, you're going to get all the files for this. You're going to get my DI tracks and the MIDI for the drums, and you can practice kind of mixing it yourself. And so far I don't think anyone's tagged me in any of their mixes of this stuff, so if you've done it and posted anything on YouTube or anywhere, put it in the comments so I can check out your mixes of this stuff. So let's check out the guitars. Now, you know what? I remember recording these guitars for this demo a long time ago, and I think I was using 10 to 52s, and I think I recorded the guitars in drop B, and that is just a little bit too light on string gauge. So the guitar tone could have been better with some slightly thicker strings in this scenario. So I'm just prefacing that. So this is how the guitars sound. So what we've got going on here then, let's get this guitar in mono. On this channel we have my plugin using the 5150. STL Libra. And ignore everything else you're seeing. We are using Mix EQ Cab 5 top right. So that is the Marshall cab with the vintage 30, and this has been pre-EQ'd, and I think it might be, there we go, the SM57 and 421 combo, and it is pre-EQ'd. So that's how it sounds. And I've got an EQ on the guitar bus. And this is here just to kind of look at whilst I'm checking the guitar tone. So I'm just kind of noticing that everything is kind of where it should be. The low end and the high end are roughly peaking around the same point. And I've dialed in the tone on the amp to get this to sit in the mix. Then I'm going to look at these quieter tracks here. So use my plugin again. Same amp, is it the same settings? It might be. And let's see what cab I've loaded in. So this is Mix EQ cab number 2, the top left speaker with the SM57. So this impulse response has been pre-EQ'd by me. So this is not a flat impulse response. This has been tweaked to sit in the mix with some generic sort of 5150 settings. So I think the guitar settings might be similar, but the cabs are different on these secondary tracks. And these are a fair bit quieter in the mix. And I don't pan my secondary tracks that far out. So let's go back to hearing how these sound in the mix all together. So we've got the C4 multiband compressor here. So this is taking care of the low end chug on the palm mutes. So I've got 66 and 286 here. It's only working in this area, and it only kicks in when there's a bit of a woomph on the chugging. And if you don't have the Wave C4, if you've got other plugins like some of the FabFilter ones, you could use FabFilter Pro MB, doing the same sort of thing. But in terms of any mix EQ, that we have none. This is just here because I like using this frequency analyzer just to look at the tones and see exactly what's going on. So you could easily, if you wanted to add more EQ, you can make it brighter or darker, but I would suggest just playing around with these impulse responses using amp settings to kind of dial in the tone for the mix. And it's kind of fun to be a bit more restrained by not using EQ and just doing basic things like EQing the guitar amp itself and just checking just the level of the guitars in the mix, because that's a big thing, just balancing levels of things like kick drum, snares and guitars and bass. In terms of sometimes people over EQ things when it could have just come down or up in volume, whichever piece of the mix it is. So I'm going to check out this tone here and isolate this guitar again and look at the amp settings and see if I can improve them at all. So I think what I found with in this instance, this is using the Marshall cab and it has quite a lot of upper mid-range. The high end on the amp has kind of boosts quite a bit of that, so I'm getting more of my high end from the presence control and less from the high end on the amp. But I could probably actually go a little bit brighter on that. And obviously I've got the cabinet and the effects turned off on this plugin. And let's try copying that setting onto the other side. Cool, so there you have it. In my impulse response pack, there's a ton of pre-EQ'd guitar cab impulse responses, so they require very little, if any, tweaking within your mix. Just dial in the amp settings how you see fit and see how it works with various impulse responses in the pack. Also, thanks again to everyone on my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Josh Solosis Official.